Hello, this is Morel Bernard with the continuing story of Dracula. Reading from Mina's journal. Yes, the last words were, "It is a most noble ruin of immense size and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. And by the way, please subscribe, and please share these videos. Much appreciated, thank you." So, continuing with reading from the journal. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbour, and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbour that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the grave stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long, looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I'm writing now with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of three old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. The harbour lies below me with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy sea wall runs along outside of it. On the near side, the sea wall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and the end, too, has a lighthouse. Between the two piers there is a narrow opening into the harbour, which then suddenly widens. It is nice at high water, but when the tide is out it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk running between banks of sand, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbour on this side there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell which swings in bad weather and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost, bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He's coming this way. He's a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he is nearly 100 and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I'm afraid, a very sceptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady at the Abbey, he said very brusquely, I wouldn't fash myself about them, miss." Then things be all wore out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for comers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice young lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eating curd up herring and drinking tea and looking out to buy cheap jet could creed aught. I wonder myself who'd be bothered telling lies to them, even the newspaper, which is full of folk talk. I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from, so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he laboured to get up and said, "I must gang agawards home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when the tea's ready, for it takes me time to cram along the greens, for there be a many of them, and miss, I lack belly timber. Surely by the clock. He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying, as well as he could, down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town up to the church. There are hundreds of them. I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have had something to do with the abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by this. 1st of August. Another journal entry. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the 2 others who always come and join them. He is evidently the Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything and downfaces everybody. If he can't out-argue, then he bullies them and then takes their silence for agreement with his news. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in a white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful colour since she's been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She's so sweet with old people. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it down. It be all fool talk, lock, stock and barrel, that's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and wafts and boar ghosts and bargettes and bogles and all ancient them is only fit to set brains and dizzy women a blundering. They be naught but air bloods. They and all grims and signs and warnings be all invented by parsons and ilsome books bodies and railway touters to scare and snuffer happening, and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to. It makes me airful to think of them. Why, it's them that, not content with printing lies on papers and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on the tombstones. Look, here, all around you, in what art we will, all them stinks, holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride. Is a kind simple tumbling down with the weight of the lies wrote on them. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory, wrote on all of them, and yet in nigh half of them there be no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't care a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of them, nothing but lies of one kind or another. My gosh, but it be a square scoundrelment at the day of judgment when they come tumbling up in their death sacks, all jommed together, and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was. Some of them trembling and dithering with their hands that doesn't and slipping from lying in the sea that they can't even keep their grub on them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air, and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies, that he was showing off. So I put in a word to keep him going. "Oh, Mr. Swells, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong." "Yablins, there may be a poorish few not wrong, Savin, where they make out the people too good. For there be folk that do think a balm bowl be like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now look you here. You come here a stranger, and you see this kirkgarth. I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on. And you constate that all these steams be a bone folk that be happened here, snogged and snog. I assented again. Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why there be scores of these lay beds that be tomb, as on Dunk's Backons on Friday night. He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. And my gosh, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one, the Abstus, Abat, the Beer Bank. Read it. I went over and read. Edward Spenslag, master mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andorras, April 1854, etc. Age 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. Who brought him home, I wonder, to hap him here? Murdered off the coast of Andorras. And you constate this body lay under. Why, I could name ye a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above. He pointed northwards, or where the currents may have drifted them. There be the scenes around ye. You can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the levy off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777, or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Farewell a year later, or old John Rawlins, whose father sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in 50. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me outherons about it. I tell ye that when they got here, they be jumbling and jostling one another, that way, that it. You be like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark and trying to tie up our cuts by the light of the aurora borealis. This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man crackled over it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. But, I said, surely you're not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people or their spirits will have to take their tombstones with them on the day of judgment. Do you think that will be really necessary? Well, what else be thy tombstones for? Answer me that, miss. To please their relatives, I suppose. To please their relatives, you suppose? This be said with intense scorn. How will it pleasure their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies? He pointed to a stone at one feet which had been laid down as a slab, on which the seat was rested close to the edge of the cliff. Read the lies on that turf stone, he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leant over and read. Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died in the hope of glorious resurrection on July 29, 1873, falling from the rocks of Kettleness. This tomb was erected by his sorry mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see aught funny, But that's because you don't go on the sorrying mother was a hell cat that hated him because he was a crude. A regular lamenter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for scaring the crows with. 'Twa'n't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the doubts to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say myself that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now isn't that steen at any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A pack of lies. And won't it make Gabriel cackle when Geordie comes panting up the greaves with a tombstone balanced on his hump and asks it to be took as evidence? I did not know what to say, but Lucy turned the conversation and she said, rising up, "Oh, why did you tell us of this? It is my favourite seat, and I cannot leave it. And now I find I must go on sitting over the grave of a suicide. That won't harm ye, my pretty, and it may make poor Geordie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here off and on for 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't ye fash about them as lies on ye, or that doesn't lie there either. There'll be time for ye to be getting scut when ye see the tombstone all run away with, and the place as bare as a stubble field. There's the clock, and I must go. My service of you, lady." And off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was also beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat. And she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. The same day, I came up here alone, for I am very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly. They run right up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next the abbey. The sheep and lambs are bleating in the fields away behind me, and there is a clatter of a donkey's hoofs up the paved road below. The band of the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hears the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. Dr. Seward's Diary, 5th of June. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. He has great qualities, very largely developed. Selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. I wish I could get at what is the object of the latter. He seems to have a more settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not yet know. His redeeming quality is a love of animals, though indeed he has such curious turns in it that I sometimes imagine he's only abnormally cruel. His pets are of all sorts. Just now his hobby is catching flies. He has at present such a quantity that I have had myself to expiate. To my astonishment, he did not break out into a fury, as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment and then said, May I have 3 days? I should clear them away. Of course, I said that would do. I must watch him. 18th June. He has turned his mind now to spiders and has got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with the flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has used half his food in attracting more flies from outside to his room. 1st of July. His spiders are now becoming as great a nuisance as his flies, and today I told him that he must get rid of them. He looked very sad at this, so I said that he must clear out some of them at all events. He cheerfully acquiesced in this, and I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much while with him, for when a horrid blowfly, bloated with some carrion food, buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between his fingers and thumb, and before I knew what he was going to do, put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly that it was very good and very wholesome, that it was life, strong life, and gave life to him. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment of one. I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problem in his mind, for he keeps a little notebook in which he is always jotting down something. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers added up in batches, and then the totals added in batches again, as though he was focusing some account, as the auditors put it. I will stop for now. Join me in the next video of the story of Dracula. Join me in the next video of Dracula. I'll see you then. Morel saying, join me in the next video of Dracula. See you then.